All right, so we're good. Thumbs up, we can start. All right, well, good evening, everybody. I'd like to introduce myself. Um, my name is Tony Peterson. I'm a follower of Christ, and I'm also in recovery for alcohol and drug addiction. And so, kind of before I get into my story, I want to just give everybody just a quick update because many of you know currently what me and my wife are struggling with as a family is we have a 1-year-old daughter. Well, she actually just turned 13 months, and she was just recently, a month and 3 days ago, diagnosed with cancer on her spine, neuroblastoma. And many of you have been praying diligently, and we've been putting out very specific prayer requests. And, that was very intentional because, like all of you, we really believe in healing prayer. And we also believe that God hears our prayers, and we also believe that God answers them according to his will. And if our will and our prayer lines up with that, then our prayers get answered the way we want. And so many of the prayers, actually all of them up until yesterday, have been answered favorably in the exact way we were asking everyone to pray. And it's been mountain moving. And it's been absolutely amazing to witness so many people, so many messages from churches all around the world, churches all around the country, and certainly churches all around Frederick and Maryland. Praying for Riley, our daughter, praying for Joanna and I. And so, just to give you a quick up to speed, we realized something was going on when Riley turned 1 and on February 11th. And a week after that, she stopped moving her legs where she had previously been walking and really running, when she was 10 and a half months. So when that sort of acute onset happened, we stepped into action. And, then of course this fast forwarded into 8 days inpatient in DC Children's National. And so since then, she has began crawling again. The cancer is definitely getting weaker. Her legs and her body are definitely getting stronger. And so the latest update was yesterday we got our last genetic testing. They took a biopsy of the tumor that's on her spine. And this specific test, this genetic test of the cells of that biopsy, this one particularly came back unfavorable, which is scary when you hear that. But really what they were looking at was how the cells divide and its likelihood of coming back. So that was unfavorable, which means that there is a stronger likelihood that it would come back and that these cells do multiply in a way that's unfavorable that we don't want to see. But however, really what that means is we have to do more rounds of chemo in order to prevent all that. So we're really grateful for, all the prayers, all the medicine, all the doctors, and all the nurses that are working diligently. Then are really experts on what's going on with Riley, and she continues to make. It's literally day by day progress in her movements, in her mood. We've got our happy little smiling, laughing girl back, and so we're grateful for all of you guys, and we continue to lock up in arms and pray with all of you for this. And we're very grateful for the community of believers that we have, most of which we don't even know personally, but we're all one body and we're all one mind. And we just thank you so much. So with that being said, I want to give you guys a little bit of a background here of my story. And I'd like to start this with a scripture verse that really stuck out to me and really kind of dug deep in my heart particularly when I was at the Frederick Rescue Mission in the recovery program. And so many of you probably are familiar with this. And in Ephesians chapter 3, Paul's talking, and in verse 20, he says this: "Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen." And so that's the end of a prayer that Paul is giving to the Ephesians. And he ends it with that just beautiful caveat that Jesus Christ is able to do immeasurably more than we can think or imagine. And that's certainly what's taken place, I believe, in my life. So I was born in Baltimore in the late 80s. I have two older sisters. And so it was my mom and dad and the three of us. And really early on, there was a lot of problems. The very first memory that I can actually recollect as sort of a scene is my father being really angry and more than likely under the influence of something or lots of things. And I just can vividly remember him throwing heavy glass, heavy liquor glasses across the room at my mother, and my mother just kind of dodging those. And if I think back at what's the very first thing I ever remember in life, that's the scene that pops in my mind. And I've given this a lot of thought multiple times, and nothing else has come to mind. So that's the very first thing that I can think of in my life. And so my father struggled with alcoholism and drug addiction. When I was about 5 years old, we were living in Dundalk in Baltimore County, and that's when my parents got divorced. And when they got divorced at the time, the courts had me and my sisters live with our father, although he was much more dangerous on the surface. He looked good. He could always make himself look good. Put on a mask, and play the part that he needed to in any given time. And so this is the first role model I had, first model of how to act, as a man. And so we moved with my father, the three of us, and we lived there for 3 years. And throughout that time, I was so young, so I didn't really get what was going on. But what was going on was my father was living this double life as an accountant and, a good guy and all these things. And, at night using drugs and alcohol and also stealing from his job, his accountant job. And all that life eventually caught up to him. And when I was about 7, maybe turning 8 at the time, I had found out, we had just abruptly moved to my mother's house. And I had found out that, he had attempted suicide for the second time. And, I didn't understand any of this. That would come a few years later. But what would ultimately happen is he would take off and he would flee from the law when I was 7, 8 years old. And that's the last any of us have ever heard from him. We're not sure if he's alive, if he's dead, what he's got going on, where he lives, what he's doing. And so it was just kind of immediate left turn right out of nowhere. And so then we moved in with my mom, and who would be my stepdad. And that was a complete shift in growing up styles. I was there with my biological father, and he wasn't around much, and I could do whatever I want. When we did go out to a mall or anything like that, I could buy whatever I want. So it's this immediate, instant gratification that was my lifestyle at a very young age. And then moving in with my mother, it was the complete opposite. It was very strict rules and regulations and expectations on how to live. And so it took me a little bit to adjust to the discipline that was the discipline and the structure. And after a year or two, I really responded well as far as accomplishments. I sort of straightened up getting into middle school and high school, and I excelled in sports and academics. I graduated 1 year early from high school in a class of 600 something people, number 2 in my class, and was offered multiple scholarships for things. At the time, I was also a ranked basketball player on the East Coast. So I was getting some attention for that with college at the time as well. Ultimately, I hurt my ankle, so I didn't go that route, but I had the grades to fall back on. And I had a lot of different opportunities to go to larger universities for a decent scholarship, but ultimately the local community college offered me completely everything free. And I said, that's a pretty good deal, free for 2 years, everything. So I ended up taking that and was able to stay home, which is what I wanted to do anyway. And it was sort of at that time, graduating early from high school and being thrown into right into college, and not really knowing what I wanted to do, like most people that age, but also I was getting a lot more freedom. The rules were loosening up because I was in college and all those sort of things, and I really took that time to explore all the wrong things and do all the wrong things and party and go out and all that sort of stuff. And very quickly, towards the end of my very first semester, I was still 17, just getting ready to turn 18, and I had moved out at that time. Really just wanted to do my own thing and not be under what I thought was just this strict reign of rules and restrictions on my life. And it didn't go well. I turned 18 the following year, still was kind of my way through school. I was able to hold on to my scholarship for a little bit longer, but was dropping out of a lot of classes because of partying and just putting school off and all that sort of stuff. And and then December 7th of 2007, which was a year after college had started, I got into a really bad car accident. And I was drinking at the time, but although I was under 21, I was still, I can't have any alcohol in my system. But had I been 21, I was under the legal limit. None of that really matters because I didn't get in any trouble for this. They never sort of found out about that, but that's just a little bit of background. I was drinking at the time and driving, which was starting to become a normal for me, even at that age of 18, is why I tell you that. But the accident ended up injuring me pretty bad, my back and my neck, and I broke my wrist. And so this would be the start of opiates in my life. And at that time, another big part of my life that last year and a half was I was beginning to sell drugs on the party scene. And that was snowballing, not into drug use, but into just pride in this whole other addiction of, selling drugs and kind of wanting to be the man in that kind of arena and all that sort of stuff. And but one thing I didn't know much about was opiates at the time, or that's not any part of the thing I was doing, or selling or any of that stuff. But that's when I got introduced to them when I was 18, and I would take them. I was in a lot of pain. I would take them as the doctor prescribed, and then that kind of went on for a year or two. And then when I stopped taking them, I felt not right, and I didn't know why until a friend introduced me, and he said, "Hey, are you still getting prescribed those?" And I said, "Maybe I got one more refill." And he goes, "Yeah, I'll buy all those off you for this price." And in my mind, I'm not understanding, why would you want to buy this? It's just medication. It's just a pill. And that's when it started for me to go, okay, this is something different. This is a whole different animal. And so what would happen is, from 18, at this point I'm 19. And so from 19 on, I would spend until I was 29. So I spent 10 years, the better part of 10 years, in this cycle of addiction where, I pretty much was able to stay moved out of my parents' house and somewhat get by taking care of myself. I was able to, kind of like my father's example when I was real young, I was able to put on a face to the world and get done the bare necessities of what I needed. But I was wrecking every relationship, normally sooner rather than later, that I was in, and taking advantage of people and manipulating everyone and lying about everything, so much so that I just, pretty much, just believed all my own lies. I was killing myself, very literally. With alcohol was my main substance, and pain pills were number two. And anytime I got drunk, I thought it would. Every time I got drunk enough, I thought it was a good idea to go get a pill, and then it just led to more blackouts and more bad decisions and more consequences. So, but the underlying thing is I was really good at putting on masks. And so I think the biggest mask that I was able to put on is when I was 25, I met my wife now, Joanna. And I was working as a cook in a restaurant, and she was working as a server. And I had also, right when we started working together, I recently got promoted, so I was the manager of this restaurant, and everything was going well career-wise. As far as doing this, I was moving up. I was really good friends with the owner. Doing well financially as far as what I was bringing in, but of course I was spending all of it on substances. But Joanna didn't know any of that. All she knew was I was charming her and being funny with her and flirting with her and being nice to her and everything you do when you're trying to attract a woman in your life. I was doing that well. And I was doing really well at hiding everything else that I didn't want her to know. And this ultimately led to us dating. And then 4 years later, which now we're in 2017, September 2nd, we got married. Now, if I back up just a bit, so in the middle of this, so we're working at this restaurant. She's only working there part-time to pay for another degree. She had gone back to school to become a dental hygienist, which is what she does now. But she was also working a full-time job as a recreational therapist, that she's very successful at that career, and she wanted to change. So she was busy doing school, working full-time, and saving up money to pay for it, and dating me. And I was busy trying to make sure I covered all my tracks, looked really good at work, did my job well while I was there, and do whatever I wanted without anybody knowing otherwise. So that's sort of the lives we were living at the time. And my addiction was it was very cyclical. And at that particular time was a really difficult cycle where I was beginning to use a lot more. And it was because I began to start stealing from my job. And I did it in a very deceiving way in which, it was very hard to track and all those sort of things. And I tell you that because I was able to get away with it for many months. And so all I did was spend all that money on pain pills and alcohol. And it just made my addiction worse and worse. Eventually, it kind of got to a point after about 6 or 7, maybe 4 to 6 months, this was going on. And towards the end of that, my boss was starting to catch on, who was one of my best friends at the time. And so I sort of kind of felt the heat coming up my back and abruptly quit. And when I abruptly quit, I called him on the phone. I admitted what I was doing, and I was just sobbing, and I need help, and I need to figure this out. And then from that point on, I just ignored any calls that he was. I just apologized, said I needed help, and then didn't do any action following those words. I just ignored his calls. I went on about my business. I admitted this to all of those close to me and to my girlfriend at the time, Joanna. I told her about it, and everybody really kind of backed off for a month or so, and then everybody slowly started just coming back in my life. I was able to go to a couple Celebrate Recovery meetings, convince everybody I think I got this now, and I'm just going to keep trying these meetings, and everything's good. And the whole while I'm just starting the cycle over again. I'm just saying what people want to hear, doing things that look like what I think people want to see. And so I kind of just got a restart, and I never got in trouble at that point with the stealing that I had done from the restaurant. I think maybe it just took a long time to catch up and figure out in the books because of how I had done it. But either way, I felt like I got away with all this stuff. So what I did was I just continued to go on dating my wife. We ultimately got married on September 2nd, 2017. And, nothing changed. No change. I kept doing the same stuff I was doing, hiding it all and living a double life. And it's just like with the restaurant. We had a little extra money that came in from a wedding reception, just like I had a little extra money when I was stealing it from my job, and that's when my addiction ramped up. Anytime I had extra money, I'm putting it towards pain pills and alcohol. And So 3 months after we got married, on December 21st, just 4 days before Christmas, at the end of 2017, I took one pain pill, and it was laced with fentanyl, and I overdosed and I died. And I died in my drug dealer's house. And they spent about 10 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, figuring out what to do because they're drug dealers, you know. Ultimately, they called an ambulance, and I'd woken up, and they had already given me Narcan, I believe, once, and nothing happened. And I ended up waking up in the ambulance right as we were pulling up to the hospital. And I'm pretty sure they thought I wasn't going to, you know, for what I heard after the fact. But this all came from one pain pill that was pretty much just all fentanyl, just to give you an idea how powerful this stuff is. And, you know, there was no hiding. There's no hiding this at this point. You know, I had to get picked up from the hospital and all these things. And now my wife knows I overdosed from pain medicine. And of course, I'm trying to justify, it was laced. It's not even my fault, you know, sounding absolutely insane because it's not my fault. I just did drugs, really, is what I was saying. But it just sounded ridiculous, you know. It's not my fault the drug dealer laced it with something, you know. It is my fault. And I still was trying to be in denial and justify and rationalize every part of my life that I wanted to keep doing. And so a week later, we had just got married, you know. 3 months later, I had this overdose. And then a week after that, my wife moved out of our townhouse. We had just moved in together. And 2 weeks after that, she sent me a message and said, I'm moving back in the townhouse. You need to find somewhere else to live. So I did. And I rented a room. And now we're in 2018. And she said, I'm not going to talk to you. And there was a to-do list. So you get help, till you do this, till you do this. So we spent 327 days without any communication, just completely blocked off from one another. And I spent that entire time still trying to just look good, try to complete just the minimum, an outpatient program, and really minimizing everything, all the while still drinking and trying to get in between drug tests in this outpatient program, and still doing everything the wrong way, just trying to get enough paperwork to show her that I've got it figured out. And she just stood her boundary. She spent that time going to Al-Anon meetings and I think some Nar-Anon meetings, but she got in a group and figured out what was going on in her and with me. And, you know, I spent that time doing the opposite. And so we came together 327 days later. And what she said to me was, after keeping a prayer journal for all this time and being very angry with the entire situation and all sorts of other emotions, this is what she was telling me. She kept praying and praying and praying, and she felt God say, cast your net back out one more time. That's what she told me, word for word. Or God was saying clearly to her, cast your net out one more time. She cast her net out one more time in our marriage, and I failed it again. Still doing the same stuff, using all this stuff. But I failed in her presence. You know, we were together when she kind of said, okay, she realized you're still doing the same stuff. There's been absolutely no change. In fact, it's been a backslide. You're worse than when I left you originally. And it was at that moment where I really felt this coming to believe of what was really going on in my life and how much the one person that absolutely loves me for just because she loves me is so hurt. And I've realized kind of with her obedience to God to cast her net back out, you know, I felt like I let this slip through my hands again. You know, I've messed it up again. And so I was kind of at my bottom at that point, and I realized I can't do this anymore. And then about a month later, I got my affairs in order, and January 21st of 2019 was my first day at the Frederick Rescue Mission. And so 3 days after being in the rescue mission, I got sent to a weekend retreat called Credo that they do. And I just really felt like God was speaking to me as clear as I had ever had it in my life. I was saved when I was 13, and I'd fallen away from church right about when I transitioned into college, just doing my own thing. And at that point, I really felt like God's presence I was allowing that to come back into my life. And that was a real turning point. And I remember specifically coming back on a Sunday evening at 6:10. And on that Sunday evening when I came back in, Listen, Love, Pray was there. And so I had just come off this whole weekend of, amazing worship and fellowship and communion and all these, and confession, all these powerful things. And I was really on a spiritual high. And then I come back into the mission, which is all still new to me because I'd only been there 3 days and then went on this weekend. And Listen, Love, Praise there. And I think one of the reasons I was just so open to hands being placed on me and praying is I just experienced all this radical Holy Spirit at the Credo experience. And I just remember from that very first prayer, on my sheet, I was asking for prayer to not restore my marriage. At that point, I think I was asking for just healing for both of us. I think I'd gotten to a point where I was just ready to surrender absolutely everything, not just do things for somebody or not just do things to look a certain way, or I was just ready to surrender, and allow God's presence to flow in everything, the way I thought, the way I did things, the way I operated. And I knew that my own thinking and what I was doing for over 10 years wasn't that. And so at that point, I was willing to just surrender to the entire program, to everybody that was willing to help. And it's just interesting to me that as I think about this right now in this moment, that Listen, Love, Pray was the first group that I actually had a class with at the mission. The first 3 days, you kind of get a freebie to just get your body right. And so the first group that I've experienced at the rescue mission was Listen, Love, Pray. And not just that time, but every single time, and it was anybody that was volunteering for this organization would just lay a hand on my back and even not start to pray, just do that and just pause for a minute. I could just feel God's presence. There's a feeling there that I miss because of all, everything going on and all that. And it's just, there's much more to the story, but, for time's sake, I spent an entire year at the rescue mission. And what would happen is a lot of miraculous things. I really felt God calling me to ministry. God was also restoring our marriage. God was dealing with the legal issues from that restaurant situation, which had gone with nothing for 5 years. And then all of a sudden I was praying for it to be taken care of. And all of a sudden there's a warrant out of nowhere, which was a good thing because I wanted to take care of it. I was ready to. And then me and my wife not only, came back together, but we got pregnant with Riley. And now she's 13 months. And, there's been a lot of good that's come out of that. Just the surrender at the rescue mission. There's a lot of good circumstances that are absolutely immeasurably more than I could have ever thought or imagined. I would never think that I'm an associate pastor at a church speaking to this group after everything that I just told you. I would never think that my wife would ever be my wife. I would never think that we have the daughter we have. And all these circumstances are really good. There's a lot of good stuff, But more than any of that, there's a peace, there's a peace, there's a joy that's unshakable in my life. There's a confidence that's not for me at all. It's because I've seen all the terrible things that I've been through in my life, but God's been faithful through every single one. And so, with that, I don't want to take up too much more time in case there's questions, but I'm just really honored to be a part of this group and be able to share all of that with you. So thank you all for letting me share that. I really appreciate it.